Um, I've never kept it a secret that my own brother suffered from clinical depression and anxieties. This goes back into the mid 90s and took his own life in January of 1996. And this is before a lot of changes happened in the system. So he didn't have nearly the opportunities to be able to chase a cure. He did, for lack of a better terms, electroshock therapy, which worked for him on several occasions, but it only lasted a very short amount of time. He was medicated. He was in med school, so he was completely aware of his disease. He was completely aware of what needed to be treated, but there wasn't a lot. And frankly, there was a massive stigma, way more than there is now, around suicide. And what this has done for me personally is that it's brought it all back, needless to say, because this was a very close friend of mine, and I'm face to face with this once again, and it just seems like more of the same to me. But what Carrie, my brother, told me is when he was trying to explain this disease and explain, he's someone who attempted many times to take his own life, and the way he explained it was akin to cancer. And that most people, and this is back in 1996 when really nobody was talking about it like this, that people fight cancer. Everybody who gets cancer fights it. Some people live and some don't. And suicide in this case is for lack of a better term, the natural progression of the disease, or it is a way that the disease ends. And this is just from a guy who was in the middle of that. So was he, Dr. Ferguson, does that make sense to you? Was he in tune at that point with making that analogy, or was he completely off base?
I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I've never actually heard the analogy put in that way, but as I'm listening to you, it makes a lot of sense. And I liken that to a chronic illness, right? Something that sort of erodes over time. And I think too, in that regard, with suicidality, especially, when we look at risk factors around suicide, the more times that someone attempts suicide is the more likely they will complete suicide. And so that would go in line with what he's saying as well, is that, there were multiple attempts, and then usually people succeed at some point. That's the ultimate end, and they know that.
And when you say they know that, the victim,
the individual,
the individual knows it.
Yeah, in a lot of ways they do. They feel like they will succumb to that. There are exceptions. There are people who, for whatever reason, are able to find a way out of it. But again, that is a very high risk factor when people attempt at least once or more than once. Then we look out.
Yeah, and as a clinician yourself, is it? I was talking to another psychiatrist who had mentioned to me that, he does get, because the nature of his work is that he gets calls from the coroner and has to have these discussions and try and track down his patients, and he says that 25 years later he is still shocked at the people who complete.
Yes.
Is that something that you have seen as well, or?
Definitely. I mean, yeah. I think that sometimes we think we know and we understand, and even when we've been in this business for a long time, we still, we're still surprised at times when we see that people would have completed suicide when we thought they were sort of on the other end. They were kind of doing better. They seemed like they were, calmer, happier, and then they'll complete. And so that's why when you say the, rational thought around this topic is challenging. We're trying to make sense of something that doesn't always make sense. And then we're trying to understand why somebody would do something. And sometimes people get angry because, like, why would you do that? Why would you hurt us? And there isn't any intention to do that, right?